Wake up to what's going on. Wake up. There's something wrong. Wake up. Stop looking the other way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Chair Sessions with Dr. D. My guest today is Wayne Maureau. On the line from New Orleans, Wayne's a drummer, percussionist, composer, and a musical educator. He's the author of The Multi-Stylist Drummer, Guide to Drumming, and he also performs with a number of local and touring bands. I first met Wayne a few years ago when Soul Project New Orleans performed at the Jersey Shore. Wayne's going to talk to us today about his musical background and influences and his music. Welcome aboard, Wayne. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today.
Oh, thank you, brother. Thanks for having me on your show.
So let's start with your involvement with Soul Project New Orleans. That's where I first saw you guys and saw you perform at the Jersey Shore. Talk a little bit about that and how you got involved with them.
Yeah, so I got involved with them through the band's leader, Christian 𝘲𝐾. Christian came to New Orleans many, many years ago and was a protege of one of our great legends and icons of New Orleans music, Walter Wolfman Washington. And I've been a big fan of Walter's my whole life and actually wound up playing in Walter's band for almost the last 15 years of his life. So that's kind of how I met Christian, is through associations with Walter. Christian would do a gig with us, or Christian was always coming out to the gigs. And so he and I met, and he heard me play. And so during the pandemic, Christian decided it was time to revamp his band Soul Project that had been working in New Orleans for, I don't know, almost 20 years, I guess, at that point. And he asked me if I would be interested in playing with him. And of course I was, because, you know, he's a real funky guitar player, and he had many of Walter's kind of mannerisms and vibe in his music, which I love. So I started playing with him during the pandemic, and it's been working out great ever since. And we've been doing some touring, and we've actually been overseas with the band. And we put out an album that was last year that we recorded live in Norway.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So it's a great record, and it was a really fun trip. And so that's kind of how Christian and I kind of hooked up, was through the great Walter Wolfman Washington. And we see eye to eye a lot on groove and feel and funkiness. And so it was really a good fit for the two of us to work together.
Well, that's one of the obvious things when you guys are performing together. When I saw you guys at 𝐼𝐴𝐺𝐻𝑚𝐴𝐻𝑛's in Red Bank. Tight. Yeah, really. You know, and the energy that you guys brought. So I heard there's some links to Soul Project NOLA to New Jersey. Is that right?
Yes. So Christian, the band leader, grew up on the Jersey Shore in Toms River, I believe.
Okay.
And so he was up there as a kid, went to school up there before he moved down to New Orleans. So during the Hurricane Katrina evacuation, when no one could live in New Orleans, he went back to his hometown and was playing gigs around town and, you know, doing things musically. And, you know, people were taking notice because there was a lot of attention on New Orleans and people from New Orleans, especially musicians at the time. So he built up, you know, a little bit of attention and quite a little following in the Jersey area. And so since then, he's been trying to keep that connection rolling by making a little tour up the East Coast at least once a year.
Well, there definitely is a following. It's an energized following, and I know the following because I'm part of it. It's like a yearly pilgrimage that you guys do when you come back here to New Jersey. Everybody looks forward to it, and it's usually in the summer, which there's nothing like summer at the Jersey Shore. And so when you guys come into New Jersey, it's always bringing Mardi Gras with you.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you know, and it's the perfect time for us too, because summer is the slow season in New Orleans. So that's when a lot of bands go on tour. And so it's really nice for us to kind of get out of town and get out of the humidity and come up there and play on the coast. And, you know, we got a lot of great fans up there. And, you know, like I said, a really nice following that Christian has cultivated over the years. And it's been a pleasure to get to know all of those people and make some new fans and some new friends.
Love it. Love it. Let's go into your little bit about your background, your training, your influences. I definitely want to get to the Walter Wolfman Washington at some point, but let's go back even before that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Walter is definitely part of my story, but going back to the beginning, I'm born and raised a native New Orleanian. And, I took a liking to music at a very young age and started playing drums and played all through school, played in all the high school bands, played in all the college bands. And, at a certain point during college, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wasn't really interested in anything else. Music was my calling, so to speak. So when I got finished with school, I just started going around town looking for gigs and started picking up some gigs and playing with people and, sort of cutting my teeth on the local scene. I did a lot of gigs with musicians who were older than I was, sometimes 10, 15, 20 years older than me, which was a really great learning experience to play with the older, more seasoned cats, who really knew music. And, I've always been interested in all different kinds of music. So, I play jazz, I play funk, I play blues, Latin music, Brazilian jazz, so I'm very diverse in what I like and what I've studied. So New Orleans is a great place for that because we have a jazz scene, we have a funk scene, we have a blues scene, and we have even a Latin scene and a Brazilian scene. A lot of that was a lot more prevalent before Hurricane Katrina, but it was a great place to hone my skills as a drummer and as a drummer who plays multiple styles of music. So, that's kind of what I did after school and for many years, just making a living in New Orleans before I started, getting hooked up with musicians who were touring and starting to do studio sessions and things like that. The connection with Walter is I first saw Walter when I was 15 years old. And back then it was, I probably shouldn't say this for public record, but back then it was easy for underage kids to get into bars in New Orleans.
That's right. Same here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I was, I was going to bars and listening to music, since high school. And one of the people I saw was Walter Wolfman with his trio. And I was just blown away.
So,
and
for those not familiar with Walter Wolfman, what was he playing?
So Walter is a guitarist and singer whose style of music was funk, blues, and R&B. And he is a unique individual in the sense that his style of funk was very syncopated and very more complex, really, than a lot of funk bands. A lot of funk bands will just lay down a pocket. Walter would lay down a pocket and then throw in all these complex rhythms on top of that pocket. So from a drummer's point of view, it really appealed to me because the music was so rhythmic and there was so much going on rhythmically. And at the time, Walter had a drummer whose name was Wilbert Arnold. And they used to call him the Junkyard Dog.
Ah, yeah.
And he was super funky. I mean, this dude was bad. And I picked up a lot of things from watching him and, kind of tried to model my style of playing funk after his. And so, he and Walter was so tight. I mean, if Walter could just give him a look and they would just hit something together. And it was really something to see, the chemistry and the communication in that band. And so, I was hooked. So I started buying all of Walter's records and checking out the music. And then several years later, when I was in my early 20s, Junkyard Dog was riding his bike and got hit by a car. Ooh. And broke his leg. So he couldn't play for about 3 or 4 months. So Walter needed drummers to fill in for the gigs while Junkyard's leg was healing up. And I was lucky enough to go meet the guys in the band. And, I sat in and I knew some of the songs. And so I got on the sub list. So as a kid in my early 20s, I was doing some gigs with Walter.
Wow. And so were they all older than you? Like as far as the band goes, you were playing with these older guys, these older seasoned veterans?
Absolutely. Everyone in the band was older than me. I was just a kid at the time, But the experience of playing with that band, so young, in retrospect, I probably really wasn't quite ready for it.
Okay.
But I learned a lot doing it.
Wow. So looking back now where you're at today, would you say that you always were would you call yourself an old soul, where you kind of related well with some of these older musicians?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always kind of, I've always kind of gravitated towards people who were a little older than me and a little more serious minded.
Mm-hmm.
So I fit in really well with the older guys because, they were very cool, giving a young guy a chance. And I was very eager to learn and to improve myself and my musicianship. And so a lot of the older musicians like George French and great jazz pianist Larry Siebert and trying to think off the top of my head here, some of the vocalists in town. There was a lady named Sharon Martin who hired me in her band, and Betty Shirley, another great jazz vocalist that we have here. And then there was a guy named Ray Moore, who was a saxophonist who was very knowledgeable about Brazilian music and had a band called Brazilians. And he gave me a shot with that, and I learned so much from him about Brazilian music and grooves and Brazilian jazz and that whole rhythmic culture from Brazil that I didn't really know much about. And Ray would actually go down to Brazil and stay for a few months, and then he would bring me back books and recordings and things for me to study and learn from. So I really owe a lot of it to the older guys who were willing to help a younger cat out and say, hey man, check this out, check that out.
What a fantastic opportunity to have at such a young age, and to have such a diverse exposure to different styles of music. When you first started to get interested in music, was drums your first passion? Was it always drums?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I studied a little bit of piano and I studied a little bit of melodic percussion in school, but yeah, I was always a drummer at heart. Just the rhythm and the groove is what kind of drew me in. I like to play percussion. I play a little djembe and a little pandero and a little congas and, hand percussion and things. But, the drum set has always been my main instrument and the thing that I love the most.
We'll go through a little rundown of your albums for people who are not familiar with your albums. You've got a few recordings out there. In addition to performing live, you've got some albums out on the platform. We'll start from the first one. We talked earlier about your first two back in early 2000. You want to start there with 1 and 2?
Sure.
Your album in 2001?
Yeah. So how that came about, so from doing gigs all around town and getting this great mentorship from older New Orleans musicians, which is one of the things that New Orleans is great about. That wasn't just a unique experience to me. Many of the young musicians were mentored by the older guys, and it really is a sense of community here when it comes to music. But so the way I started writing is I was playing gigs and, I'm playing standard tunes and New Orleans tunes, and I would be on a gig and I would start to hear something else in my mind. It's like, oh, what if we did this tune like this, or change this groove, or change the feel of this, or rearrange this? And I started having ideas, and I wanted to be able to try those ideas with other musicians. So I first started just writing arrangements of standard jazz tunes or, tunes that everyone would play, and I would rearrange them how I was hearing it in my head. After doing that for a while, I started thinking, well, if I can write these arrangements, why can't I write my own original song? So that's when I tried to start doing that. And of course, with anything new, it's a lot of trial and error, and I wrote a lot of things that wound up in the trash. Yeah. But that's how that first album came along, is I wrote some arrangements, and that first record, I was really into Latin music and Brazilian music at the time. So that first record is a bunch of arrangements and some originals, all in Cuban and reggae and Brazilian grooves, which is, like I said, where my head was at the time. So, I wrote a bunch of tunes, and I put together a killing band of some of the great New Orleans musicians, Tony DeGrady from Astral Project, and Larry Siebert, who I mentioned earlier. And we had a great bass player in town named Tommy Seipel at the time, and a good friend of mine, Latin percussionist named 𝘱𝑒. And I did this record, and it was released in, I think, 2001. It's hard to find now because it's kind of old.
What's it called?
It's called Sidewalk Safari. And it was kind of my, first attempt at writing my own arrangements, writing my own originals, and just putting myself out there.
Yeah, I think that's such a big part of the creative process, is just not being afraid to experiment with ideas. And for you, not to be afraid of experimenting with sounds. It sounds like you already had the creative forces kind of brewing inside you as you were listening. The creative forces, whatever they are, inspiration and the way you were hearing things, you were automatically kind of going through that process while you were listening and thinking about how you're going to grow the sound into something that fits what's resonating with you.
Absolutely. I'm, as a musician, I'm mostly an improviser. You just create it in the moment. And to me, improvising and composing go hand in hand, because when you're improvising live on stage, essentially what you're doing is spontaneously composing something in the moment. So there's a big connection between improvising and composing. All you're doing when you compose a piece, off stage, is you're just taking more time with it and spending more, you can refine it more rather than just doing it in the moment.
Yep, that's the word I was going to use, refinement. And sometimes playing the pieces over and over, it actually helps you conceptualize and refine it when if you haven't already taken it into the studio. Sometimes, maybe you'll take it on the road first before the studio. Mm-hmm. Sometimes maybe it goes the opposite way. What was the process for that album? Did you perform those first and then take it into the studio?
A little bit. So, as a drummer who's trying to write and perform my own music, it's a lot more of a challenge because I can't play the melody. Right. I'm playing drums. Right?
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit more dependent on the other guys in the band to play the melody, play the chord changes. All I can do is play the groove, and handle the drum responsibilities. So yeah, we did a few gigs, not a lot. We did maybe a handful of gigs before we went into the studio, just to get everyone familiar with the music.
Sure.
Because, like I said, I have to depend on the saxophone player or the vocalist or the trumpet player or whatever to play my melody and play it the way I'm hearing it, or as close to the way I'm hearing it as possible. But I also like to give the musicians the freedom to put their own personality into my music. I'm not a bass player. I'm not a piano player. I'm not a saxophone player. So I want them to have the freedom to express themselves and using my ideas as a springboard for their own creativity. So as long as it doesn't stray too far away from what my concept of the piece is,
right,
their musicianship and their talent only makes my music better.
That's a really great way to run the process, to allow that. I think sometimes that's hard for artists to do, to kind of hand that over. But like you hit the key too. If you had to maybe reel it in, if it was straying too far from your idea or concept, you could do that. But I think when you allow the other musicians to exert their own creative freedom, at the end of the day, you end up with this really organic piece that really is, maybe it's your own baby, your own brainstorm. However, it really becomes a part of them also, and the piece becomes a part of them.
Absolutely. I mean, every recording that I've put out is a collaboration. The initial idea may have been mine, the groove idea may have been mine, the melody or whatever, but it's definitely a collaboration, because the music would not sound like it does without the input of all the musicians. And I've even, when I'm composing stuff, I even go to musicians who are friends of mine who are more knowledgeable than I about things like chord changes and stuff, and I'll get input from them. I'm like, hey, what do you think of this? And they'll say, well, this chord could be this or that, maybe instead of that. And I am not above taking suggestions and advice from friends and colleagues to make my music better. To me, music in general is a collaborative thing. Unless you're doing a solo piano gig or a solo guitar gig or something, it's a collaboration.
Right. Yep. I like to use the word synergy, and that's one thing. I feel like I have an ear for the synergy when I go out and see live music. Synergy, when it's at the top of the game, you know the synergy because you not only hear it but you feel it.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think the feeling is a big part of what it's all about. I talk about the transformative effects of music too, and I think that's when we start to hear that synergy. I think at the top levels of the synergy is where it becomes a transformative process for not only the musicians but I think for the listeners too.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And in my music, one of the things that I incorporate into my music is I like to write a lot of things that are not in typical time signatures. Like I write in 5/4, I write in 7, I write in 3, and one of the main things, like you were saying, the feel, it's got to feel good. It's got to groove. It's got to feel and sound like music, not like a mathematical problem.
Right.
It can't sound stiff or contrived or like, I'm doing this
Canned.
just because I can.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
It's got to sound and feel like music. And one of the things that happened on my last gig is we were playing one of my songs in 7, and someone came up and had to ask me if it was in 7. And so I always say, if someone has to ask, then we must be playing it right, because it's not obvious. They're not really sure. That's what I want. I want, like, this just sounds like music, but I hear something interesting in it, but I'm not really sure quite what it is.
I feel like that's the captivating part of music. And I was just having this conversation too with another musician in a blues group that again purposely uses that to kind of captivate and keep the attention and keep the people tuned in.
Yeah, absolutely. And also it's challenging for the musicians. And I like to be challenged. I like to push myself to do better. I like to push myself to play things that are more complex or more difficult. I like trying to have a challenge and to meet that challenge and to see how far I can go.
I was just going to say, so that's where the growth comes, and that's where the evolution comes, not only of the music, but as you as a person.
Oh, definitely.
And again, that speaks to the transformative process that goes on with both performing and with listening.
Yeah, and that and you're absolutely right. That mindset kind of permeates into other parts of my life. As I get older, I keep wanting to just be the best person that I can be. Be in the best physical shape I can be in the best emotional and mental shape, and in the be the best musician I can be. So to me, it's like it's all about self-improvement. I mean, what else do we really have?
That's right.
Everything else is tangible. So to me, if someone asked me, I guess the old question, what's the meaning of life? To me, it would be self-improvement. Just strive to do better, strive to be better, strive whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
Strive to do the best that you can be at it.
To reach our highest potential, so to speak.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we're here today talking. One of the things I noticed about, your projects were they all seemed to have that vibe to them, that the growth, that self-potential theme to it. And what you said earlier about the sound being like you want to keep it interesting and positive, that was the other thing that was very obvious throughout everything that I had listened to online and posted and on the music platforms. Is that was definitely very evident, and that's and that was really what caused me to reach out and have you on here, to talk. So that was the 2001. That was your first album. So there was another one in 2008.
Yeah.
Was that the next one?
In 2008, I collaborated with a good friend of mine named Mike Lemler, who's the keyboard player with George Porter Jr. and the Running Partners. And he and I had played many, many gigs all around town. You know, he's a guy kind of like me. He plays jazz, he plays funk, he plays blues. You know, we were in Brazilians, that Brazilian band I mentioned. We were in that together for years. And so after Hurricane Katrina, when there wasn't really much happening in town, I called up Mike and said, hey, you want to, you know, put something together? We'll go get some gigs, you know, we'll do something. So we put together a trio. Mike is amazing at playing left-hand keyboard bass. And so we put together an organ trio type vibe and started playing some gigs around town. And I wrote some tunes for it. He wrote some tunes for it. We were playing some other like classic New Orleans tunes. And, you know, people were coming and checking it out. And it was starting to make some headway. So we decided to do an album. So that album, I think, has 4 of my originals on it and 4 of Mike's, and then some covers. We had some special guests on there, including George Porter Jr. and Mark Mullins from Bonarama, and Steve Mazakowski, a great jazz guitarist from Astral Project.
Oh, nice.
So that was really kind of like a, you know, we're getting back into this thing. We're, you know, New Orleans is coming back after the storm, and that was sort of our, you know, cathartic project of coming back to life, you know, after that horrible event.
So what was that album called?
That album was called, let's see, the band was called Trifuncta, and the album was called, I think the album was called Hangin'.
Okay.
Because, you know, we were doing a lot of just hanging out in town. I mean, there wasn't many gigs. We were just hanging out and trying to connect with the other musicians. And, you know, it was all about that. It was just about, you know, bringing it back.
So then from 2008, your next album came out in 2020. Is that right?
Yeah. So what happened there was some personal stuff went on. My father had a stroke and a heart attack and cancer and a bunch of stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, life really took a turn. Actually, the very next year after that record came out in 2009, and so there was a lot of, you know, family stuff, and and he was very sick for many years. And there was a lot of, you know, hospital visits and ambulance rides and emergencies and this and that. So I kind of got absorbed into dealing with the family life. Sure. And then he passed away in January of 2017.
Oh, sorry.
And but interestingly enough, part of what was going on at that time is what led to some of the songs on my Homegrown album from 2020. So in dealing with the family issues and my father being sick, and, you know, it was very much of an emotional roller coaster.
Sure.
So in order to deal with some of that, I started writing down some of my thoughts and some things that I was feeling and thinking at the time. And so after he passed, I was reviewing that stuff, and a lot of it had some content and some messages in there that I thought were important. And, you know, the light bulb went off in my head, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm a musician. I can take these things and put them into song form and put them out there so that I can, you know, I can give these ideas to other people. I can put my thoughts and my experience and my insights out there, and maybe someone else could draw meaning from this as well.
Right on.
And so having never written songs with lyrics before, once again, I called on a couple of my friends from the New Orleans music scene who are incredible songwriters and incredible lyricists named Mark Carson, and my good friend John Grow, who had the band Papa Grows Funk for many years. I'm sure you've probably heard. Yep. And so I called them and I said, hey, look, I've got these ideas. I've got some rough, you know, songs, but it's, you know, it's really not polished, you know, because I've never written lyrics before. And so they said, yeah, well, we would love to help you. So we had a few songwriting sessions, and that's where the 3 vocal tunes that are on Homegrown came from, and also 2 of the ones that are on my Soul Searching record.
So you talked about with the album of 2008, you used the word cathartic. So, but it sounds like that catharsis even maybe even came to another level with putting this album together in 2020 with everything that was going on in your life, would you say?
Totally. This one was much more, the 2020 record, after all of that with my father, that one was much more emotional and much more, on a deeper level.
That's it.
The other one was cathartic in the sense of like the city and like not being able to work and not being able to play with other musicians. And that's one thing.
In a general sense, almost.
Yeah.
In a collective. Yeah.
Yes. But when it's a close family member and everything that we went through with that situation, that was a whole nother thing.
Sure. Deeper, more personal.
Yeah.
And that really comes out when I was listening to the tracks on Homegrown. Some of the ones that really resonated were, so Tomorrow Never Comes.
Mm-hmm.
If you just take the title, you'd think, well, that sounds kind of depressing. However, when you listen to that song, man, positive, it does resonate a very positive energy, a positive vibe, so to speak. And I feel like that vibe is kind of, that's resonated throughout that entire album. The ones that stood out for me were Tomorrow Never Comes, and like yourself, I can relate to some of those personal, issues with the family going through, medical conditions and things like that. And music for me, same thing, has been such a great part of it. I don't play, but the listening side. So when you talk about, reaching people, and I'm one of those people who those songs that you put together in 2020 definitely resonate with, and they have a strong positive vibe. They almost give you a sense of hope listening to them. The other one was called Denial.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one was the last track, Wake Up. Man.
Yep.
Those were some powerful tracks on there. So anything you want to say?
So much.
Yeah. Anything you want to say about any of those tracks that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say, that it means a lot to me that those songs reached you and had a meaning for you. Music, I've always been, obviously as a jazz musician and stuff, I listen to a lot of instrumental music, and I've played a lot of instrumental music. But when I listen to a song with lyrics, I want to be able to, draw meaning from that. I like songs that make me think. And so when I was writing mine, I wanted to do the same thing for other people. And you're right. It's like, if you just look at it on the surface, it looks like it could be a dark thing or a depressing thing. But really, those songs are about making a better life. Those songs like Tomorrow Never Comes, it's about stop waiting. If you have goals, if you have dreams, if you have ambition, stop waiting. Stop waiting and saying, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it later. Live your life now. Pursue your goals, pursue your dreams.
Carpe
Don't
diem.
Wait.
Yeah.
Right.
Seize the day.
Yeah, because if you keep saying I'll do it tomorrow, tomorrow's never going to come. Yep. Do it now. And and that's kind of what the message of a lot of those songs are. Like Wake Up is like, it's about, open your eyes, see what's going on around you. Make your decisions that are going to make things better and improve life. Don't just be in denial like the other song and like pretend it doesn't exist, or like Wake Up says, don't look the other way.
Right.
Face your life head on and be positive and do what you want to do. Don't just talk about it, do it.
Right. Activate it. Yep. It gets back to that growth, that reaching your potential, whatever that is, your human potential, and being the best that you can be. Seize the day, and the wake up. After I listened to that, I actually thought it's a call to what I like to call, it's a call to mindfulness. It's a call to being aware and mindful of simple things, maybe the beauty of things all around us that we might take for granted every day. But when we really look at them with mindfulness, we realize that there's magic in our lives every day if we pay attention to it, if we tune into it, if we wake up and we're not, we're not just going through the motions of our day like a zombie.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting that you use the word mindfulness, because one of the things that helped me through dealing with all this situation with my father was I studied some Buddhist principles. And, because I was really having a tough time holding it together, and studying some Buddhist principles about mindfulness and just, acceptance of things as they are and things that you can't change, and not reacting out of impulse but taking things as they come and dealing with things in a calm and mindful way.
Right
so
on.
it's really interesting that you use that word.
Yeah, well, that, for myself personally, and maybe this is what resonated. You obviously, that's a part of you, and that has been put into your work here with these albums, and that's probably, I think that resonated very strongly. I'm big into the Buddhist principles too. I use it in the practice where I'm in a mental health practice. I use those techniques and the philosophy and different strategies to take people who are really anxious and try to get them to find their center. So yeah, I think that resonates very strongly.
Yeah. Before we move on from the Homegrown album,
Sure.
There's one of the instrumentals on that album that I want to mention. It's a tune called "Drop a Street Beat."
Yep.
And what I did with that song, New Orleans has the tradition of second lines and street beats and brass bands and all that. And so I wanted to do an experiment with modernizing that. So I wrote a tune that is in a brass band vibe with a New Orleans street beat groove, but it's not in the typical 4/4, it's in 7/4. So, which has, if it's ever been done, I don't know about it. And if it has, it's very rare. So, and I think it came off really nice. I mean,
Yeah.
The guys did a great job playing it, and it feels really good, despite the fact that it's in an odd time signature.
Yep. And again, I think it gets back to, I think I use the word captivating. I think that it pulls you in. It pulls you in a way that we're not used to being pulled in. So that's Homegrown 2020, and that one actually is available. That's also available on the platforms, right?
Yes, you can find that anywhere. Yeah, it's all over.
2022, then we go into the Water's Edge, and
Yeah.
I'll tell you, when I listened to that one, I got a very heavy. What resonated for me was a very jazzy, and I could sense a very strong, like a Latin vibe and influence there.
Right. So there's a couple of interesting things about that record. First, let's talk about the Latin vibe.
Sure.
So New Orleans has a strong Caribbean influence.
Yes.
Right? I mean, our city has been described as the northernmost city of the Caribbean many times throughout history. We have a strong Caribbean influence. We have a lot of Caribbean rhythms in New Orleans music. And so part of what I wanted to do on that record is write some things that had that Caribbean sort of vibe mixed with jazz, because New Orleans is all about that. I mean, a lot of our architecture looks Caribbean. You can drive through certain neighborhoods. All the houses are painted as if it was down in the islands with bright colors. And, we have that Caribbean culture that's part of our uniqueness here in New Orleans. And so that's, not only do I love playing all that music and all those kinds of feels, but it also says something about who we are as New Orleanians. So that record mixes, some straight ahead jazz and some other things with a lot of Caribbean grooves and rhythmic influence there. It's interesting how that record came to be, actually, because I was not planning a record at the time. And then we had another wonderful event here in New Orleans called Hurricane Ida.
Right.
Hurricane Ida came through, and my friend John Grow, who I mentioned a while ago, who helped me with some of the songs with lyrics on Homegrown, he had a huge tree fall in the storm on his house and his music studio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I called him up, knowing what that's like from Hurricane Katrina. I called him up right away and said, hey, man, what do you need? How can I help? Blah, blah, blah. And so, long story short, we came to the realization that he needed somewhere to store a lot of his instruments while he had construction crews rebuilding his studio. So he brought them to my home studio, and he dropped off his Wurlitzer and his clavinet and some guitar amps and some other stuff, along with an acoustic piano. So, as the weeks went on, it was a long time. His instruments were here for almost a year. So that's how long it took him to get straight over his place. But anyway, long story short, so his piano's sitting here, and every day I'm going in my studio, I'm practicing, I'm writing, I'm working up stuff, and I'm looking at this piano. And I started thinking, am I missing an opportunity here to do a piano trio record? Because I love the piano trio. It's one of my favorite formats for jazz and even Latin music. I'm a big fan of Michel Camilo and people who play, Latin music in the piano trio format. And I started thinking about it, I'm thinking maybe I should do this record, while that piano is here. So I started doing some more writing, going through my old compositions, what would work for the trio. I wrote some new tunes, and, I won't give you all the details of figuring out how to make it work, but I made it work, and I was able to do a piano trio record of all original music recorded right here in my home studio.
Wow.
And it came out really good.
Well, that gets to track number 2. It sounds like this was the theme for getting it done. Track number 2 is called "Go with the Flow."
Yep.
And it sounds like that's exactly what you did. As you kind of just, again, you went with the flow. You kind of let it happen organically. But you took the call to action. You didn't just say, "Oh, hey, that's a great piano sitting there every day." You're like,
right.
What am I going to do with this? It was like you took it as a wake up call almost.
Right. Well, I didn't want to miss an opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not going to purchase an acoustic piano.
Right.
So
but
it's
there
like,
it is.
when am I ever going to have an acoustic piano sitting here in my studio? I couldn't let the opportunity slip through my fingers. And, and so the other thing about that record is all of the tunes are named something that is related to water.
Yes.
We have so much, part of that is about the Caribbean influence, but part of it is about just New Orleans challenges with water. We get a super hard thunderstorm and we get street flooding.
Yep.
So that was kind of the underlying theme of that record, was about the water and the Caribbean and New Orleans challenges with water is sort of the underlying theme under that record.
Are there any tracks on that record that stand out for you that you want to say anything about?
Yeah, for sure. There's one on there called "A Day in Parachi," and that is something that I started writing after a tour down to Brazil. I was in Brazil playing some festivals, and one of them was this music festival in the town of Parachi, which is a beautiful place. It's like surrounded by the rainforest and a big lake and mountains, and it's gorgeous. And there's an old town there with ruins, and it's just a beautiful place. And they had this amazing music festival there that I played, and we were there for 2 days, so I was able to go around and listen to a lot of the Brazilian bands. And it was amazing, and I was so inspired by the music that I wrote that tune about that day that I spent checking out all that amazing Brazilian music.
Wow. So let me say something about that too, because it's interesting that you chose to speak about that one. So I was telling you earlier when we were off the recording, last night I was listening to one of your live performances with your new project, which we will definitely get to.
Okay.
But one of the selections that you performed in that live gig was the one that I told you that when I first started to hear it, I said, you know what, I literally plugged my headphones in and just laid on the couch and I listened to it, and it honestly just took me to to that place, because it was the most relaxed state when I was listening to that. So when I hear you talk just now about how inspired you were by it, you were able to transfer all of that energy into the track. And when I had my headphones on, like I said, that was the one track when you played that, I had to put my headphones on because I was like, you know what, I just want to drift off here. And that was the one. I didn't know how to pronounce the town.
Yeah, I almost didn't call it that because I knew people wouldn't know how to pronounce it, Portuguese and all. But I had to call it that.
Right.
I couldn't call it anything else.
It is what it is.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the important thing is that even at a deeper level, the vibe of that piece, of that composition, is so strong.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
There's one more song from that record that I want to mention.
Sure.
And it's the only one on the record that I did not compose.
Okay.
And it's called Punta Cana. And it was written by a good friend of mine named Rudy Gilbert. And I included it on the record because we were on a vacation, my wife and I, and him and his wife and some other friends. And we were at a resort down in the Dominican Republic in a city called Punta Cana.
Mm-hmm.
And one night we were hanging out, having drinks and blah, blah, blah. And there was a piano there. And no one was playing the piano. So my friend sits down at the piano and starts noodling around. And he starts coming up with this little melody. And I'm like, oh, hey, that's cool. Let's keep going with that. So he, kept expanding on it. And again, long story short, we came home back to the States and he finished writing the melody. And then we put some chord changes to it. And then I wrote an arrangement for it. And so it was kind of a little bit of a collaborative effort, but he wrote the whole melody. And I really liked it. It's a fun, very upbeat kind of
definitely
Caribbean or samba-ish kind of tune. Yep. And so I definitely wanted to include that on the record because I think it's a great tune. And it's to my knowledge, it's the only song he's ever written.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to get it out there for him.
Yeah, and it was that was a great way to, because it's track number 10, which is the last track on that album.
Right.
And
yes.
It was a nice way to wrap up the album. So that's At the Water's Edge 2022, and that's available on the platforms. And then that brings us to your latest, right? Which is Soul Searching. Well, if that doesn't say it all right there, just in the title, but we know there's so much more to that. 2024, Soul Searching.
So that one is, I think of that record as almost an extension of the Homegrown record. The first two tracks on Soul Searching were actually written way back when I was writing the songs for Homegrown, but I didn't feel like they were quite ready at the time of that recording. They needed more refinement. I wasn't quite happy with it yet. So I had another writing session with Mark Carson and John Groh, and we polished them up a little more and got them ready for this record. And then I started with this record. After those two songs, I started getting away from the stuff that was from my writings while my father was sick and all the stuff that had a deep emotional meaning. And I was ready to start just writing songs just to write songs for fun. So that's how the other three songs on that record came about. Femme Fatale is just a story about a guy who meets a woman and she kind of wraps him around her finger and messes with his head and then just takes off on him. Yeah,
a very common story that a lot of us can relate to.
Right. Not from personal experience. It's just a story, right? Just a story.
Yep, a story.
And and then the next song, what's the next? Long Days and Late Nights. So that one's supposed to be kind of a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek parody kind of song. And when I wrote that, I was thinking of myself in my younger days, working all the time, staying out all night, partying, Just
Oh, yeah.
like burning the candle at both ends, and feeling bad the next day because I got no sleep, and then just doing it again because
Because that's what we did.
Yeah,
when
that's
we were
what
younger.
we did. So
Yep.
that one's kind of tongue in cheek about kind of over partying and kind of putting yourself in a bad spot by doing that.
Some interesting vocals on that one.
Yeah.
Almost Louis
Well,
Armstrong like.
I'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Let me tell you about the last song,
Sure.
and then we'll revisit that. So the last song is an idea that I had during the pandemic. I was working on writing a couple of things, and I had this idea of just, those moments in life that seem surreal. When you just those moments where you're like, I can't believe this is happening, or those kinds of moments,
Yep.
or when something seems like, an out of body experience, or is like this
Surreal.
is, surreal or deja vu or
Yes.
things like that, where it's like almost a mystical type experience. And so that's where the idea for living in a dream came from.
Yeah, that almost it does have almost an ethereal sense to it.
Yeah, for sure. So back to the vocals. So on all of my songs on my records that have vocals, I always hired friends of mine who were great singers, right? So Mark Carson sang on one, and my friend Tim Robertson sang on one. On Soul Searching, we have an amazing singer in town here named Antoine Deal. He sang on 3 of the songs on the Soul Searching record. And then my friend Mike Burkhart sang on Soul Searching.
And he's from Soul Project also, right?
He now plays in Soul Project. Yes, he's been in Soul Project for the last maybe 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure. Yeah, and he's an incredible singer. So I got him to sing on one. But when it came down to long days and late nights, I had a certain idea in my head, a certain kind of vibe, and I didn't know who I could get to do it. So I did it myself.
Oh, wow.
So believe it or not, that's me.
Whoa. So, wow. So I'm not much of a techie geek, but we got to go there. I want to hear how'd you do that?
I just did it. There's no tech involved.
So there's no, you just channeled it.
Yes.
Whoa.
I just sang it like that. Yeah. I'm not a singer by any means, my pitch is sketchy at best, but I always kid around sometimes when I'm on gigs and kind of sing with that sort of gravelly voice. And I was thinking, that voice would really fit. I was trying to make it sound like an old blues guy, who's been around for 70 years, and he's been chain smoking and drinking whiskey. And, his voice is all, just wore out. And I wanted to make it sound like that.
You nailed it. Because honestly, my first impression was when I first listened to it, I thought, this guy sounds like Louis Armstrong.
Yeah. I've gotten people have said Louis Armstrong. People have said Dr. John.
Wow. Yeah.
But what no one has noticed upon first hearing, no one thinks it's me.
I would have never known.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine who was actually the trumpet player on 2 of the tracks on that song. A good friend of mine named Grant Breedlove, who lives in D.C. We went to college together. He played trumpet on Femme Fatale and Living in a Dream, and just played beautifully. But I was playing him the tracks, and he heard that track, and he's like, who's that singing on that particular track? And I was like, who do you think it is? And he goes, I don't know. I never heard that, And when I told him it was me, he made me play it again because he didn't believe me.
I'm sure. So I'm sure you probably get a kick out of hearing that now.
Oh, yeah. Because I didn't want it to sound like me.
Sure.
Like I said, my voice, if I sing in my normal voice, it's not good. I am not a singer, But I could pull that off, and it's almost like a character thing,
Yeah. Like I said, I think that you channeled it exactly what you wanted to channel.
Yeah, it came out much better than I thought it would.
Definitely one of the, definitely one of the tracks that that stood out on that one too. And I really
when I sent the record down to WWOZ, our local community radio here that plays a lot of music from local artists, I sent it down to them, and of course the first track that they play on the radio was the one with me singing. I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, I got Antoine Deal singing, I got Mike Burkhart singing, I got these amazing singers, and you're going to play the one with me singing.
There's some testament to what went on that one. Good.
I guess so.
That's awesome. So that's Soul Searching, and I just on the title track for that one, I really liked. I liked the lyrics on that one a lot. They really resonated strong, and I think that what we all need is some empathy. Look inside the heart, and of course there was the guitar solo. Takeshi Shimura?
Yeah, Takeshi Shimura. Takeshi plays with the Dirty Dozen brass band. And I met him playing with Mia Borders, another one of our amazing local musicians. Mia is an incredible songwriter and amazing vocalist. And I just need to take a second to plug her last record called Firewalker.
Fire away.
Which is an amazing record. She wrote some great songs, put together a killer band. Takeshi Shimura on guitar, myself on drums and percussion, Mike Lemler from George Porter's band on keys, Jesse Maureau on bass, and some horns, and just it's just a great record. I think it's some of Mia's best work to date.
Yeah, it really, it's a great project. Great project.
Yeah.
Great vibe, great lyrics, great composing, the playing, awesome. You've got quite an assembly of talent there. So, anything else you want to say about Soul Searching?
No, I don't guess. Other than like the tune you mentioned, the title cut, that was one of the ones I wrote during that period when my father was sick. So that one is a lot about, kind of looking inside and figuring yourself out and figuring out how you're going to go forward and how you're going to deal with things, and being true to yourself.
Amen. So that brings us to your current projects.
Yes.
In addition to playing with Soul Project, Vieuxdoo Nouveau.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so this is the next thing that I'm working on, which is going to be another record, possibly even two records. So I'm thinking of maybe possibly a volume 1 and volume 2 of this one. And this is all instrumental. I'm using a bigger group. I've got saxophone and guitar, keys, bass, and drums on this. And it's like funky improvisational jazz, but all based on grooves that are influenced by New Orleans music. There's some street beat kind of stuff in there. There's some funky things reminiscent of Walter Wolfman Washington or the Meters. Some grooves that were big influences for me from other New Orleans drummers, like Big Johnny Thomasy, who used to play with Luther Kent. Our own iconic jazz drummer here in town, Johnny Vodakovich. Who else? Herman Ernest. And some of these guys have passed away already. And they were just great influences on me as I was coming up as a New Orleans drummer. And I would listen to these guys and for lack of a better way to say it, steal their licks, steal their ideas and incorporate them into my own playing. And, watching them and learning from them really helped me a lot to develop my sound and my feel. And so I'm using that influence when I compose for this new project.
When I was listening to, or not only listening to, but watching, because it was a video performance with sound and video, I think it was on YouTube, of the Vieuxdoo Nouveau. That was the one thing. The other thing, too, was it was such a diverse, such a wide variety of sounds. I think it was like an hour-long clip where you performed, and rich in texture, like just it was so full sounding. Like you said, you had how many people were playing?
It's a quintet,
Okay,
sax, guitar, keys, bass, drums. Yeah, and it's a 2-hour show. It's our local club here, the Maple Leaf Bar, which is a world famous club.
Sure.
And they do a fantastic job with the sound. And since the pandemic, they live stream every show, and then it's available on YouTube. So you can find it on YouTube, on the Maple Leaf YouTube channel, but also on my own YouTube channel. I put it on there, and it's a great show. And that's actually the first gig with that particular band. I put that band together for that show, and that's the first gig the five of us have done together.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that's going to continue.
Oh yeah, that's definitely going to continue. I'm putting out inquiries right now for gigs in the fall, because what I want to do is gig with this band and maybe even possibly do a little bit of touring if I can make it work, and then that's going to be leading up to the next record. Exciting.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I like some of the material I've written, and more importantly, the guys in the band like the material. And they enjoyed playing it. They had a lot of fun with it. And so, when your band likes the material and they're having fun, the music just gets better.
Exactly. And that it gets back to what I said earlier. One thing that was, just very evident was the synergy that you all had when you were all playing.
It's a great group of guys. And the other thing I like about that configuration is it's also a multi-generational band. So, myself and the saxophonist, Brent Rose, we're the oldest guys in the band. And the guitar player and the bass player are in their 30s. They were actually both former Loyola students, which is where I teach in the jazz department. Mm-hmm. So they were former Loyola students. That's how I know them. And then the keyboard player is a young guy. He's like 23, I think. And he is the son of another New Orleans drummer who's a good friend of mine. And he's just an amazing player. He's just for a guy as young as he is, he's a very mature player, and he's got great ideas. And he really fit well in my music, which is, my music is not easy to play. Some of it is a little challenging, and he really stepped up and pulled it off and did a great job.
Isn't that wild how things go full circle? When you started when you started the interview, you were talking about how you were the young guy playing with Walter.
That's right.
Wolfman Washington. And now we come full circle years later, and now you're the veteran.
Yeah.
In the group, right?
And I, and that's important too, because I want to do what the older musicians did for me when I was coming up. Yeah. I want to do that for the next generation of cats coming up, which is part of the reason that I teach, because I can share what I've learned and through either my own, journey as a musician or from just things that have happened on tour or on gigs. I have a lot of my students come to me in a lesson, and we might spend the whole lesson just talking about what it's like to be on tour as a drummer, the challenges you have to deal with, the things that are cool, the things that are problematic. So I like sharing my knowledge and my experience with the younger cats coming up, because that's how I learned. People shared their information with me, or I had to go out and find it myself, which I also did. But, I think in today's world with the technology and the cell phones and the internet, there's so much information at your fingertips. Yeah. A lot of times young cats, they don't even know where to start.
Nope.
And so, having someone who can act as a mentor can really help, kind of guide them and you point them in the right direction.
Powerful. And it's great that you're giving it back.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's part of it, that's definitely part of it.
Right on. Wayne, I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about your music and your experience and your history. For the listeners, you want to find Wayne's music. It's on the streaming platforms. He's got a YouTube channel. We're going to put your information, Wayne, for your website on your YouTube channels in the liner notes of this interview so people can find your work. And maybe if they're in the New Orleans area, they'll be able to see you with your new project, Vieuxdoo Nouveau. And maybe at the Jersey Shore in the summer, we'll see you on your pilgrimage with Soul Project New Orleans.
Yeah, I hope so. The easiest way for people to find me, because nobody can spell my last name, the easiest way for people to find me is through my website. And my website is 𝑊ayneGrooves.com.
𝑊ayneGrooves.com.
𝑊ayneGrooves.com. Easy to remember. And if you go there, there's links to my YouTube channel, to my social media. You know, pretty much anything you need to know about me, you can find it through that website.
Right on. Thanks, Wayne.
Thank you. It was a pleasure doing this. I appreciate you asking me.
Same here.